Listen closely, because the moment you pull back from a woman, something inside her shifts, something she'll never admit out loud. And if you've felt that strange silence after you stop trying, that cold rush of uncertainty that hits your chest, it's because you've triggered a hidden part of her psychology that most men never learn to read. What you feel right now, this mix of doubt, curiosity, and quiet power, is exactly where everything begins. There's a reason your absence feels louder than your presence ever did. You didn't pull back because you wanted to play a game. You pulled back because you were tired of feeling like you were trying harder than she was. And deep down, a part of you wondered if she would even notice. But here's the truth men rarely get to hear. She notices instantly. Not because she's dependent on you, not because she's weak, and not because she's overly emotional, but because your energy changes, and humans are wired to sense shifts in the people they're connected to. The very first thing she feels is disruption. Not panic, not heartbreak, just a sudden interruption of the rhythm she got comfortable with. You were a steady presence. Your consistency created a sense of security, even if she never said it. When that consistency breaks, her mind tries to restore the balance. She replays your last conversation. She rethinks her last message. She questions whether she misread something. This isn't manipulation, and it's not ego. It's simply how the human brain responds when a familiar pattern suddenly changes. But the second feeling? That's the one men never expect. It's curiosity mixed with self-reflection. Not the kind where she blames you, but the kind where she quietly turns inward and wonders what made you step back. And this is where your silence becomes powerful, not because it punishes her, but because it forces clarity. When you were always giving, always available, always initiating, she didn't have space to miss you. But when you create that space, she starts reviewing the moments when she might have taken your effort for granted. And even the most confident women feel this, whether they show it or not. You see, pulling back doesn't create attraction by itself. It creates contrast. And human beings fall deeper into the things they experience in contrast. Warm feels warmer after cold. Presence hits harder after absence. Respect grows when there's space to appreciate what was once constant. She isn't suddenly overwhelmed with fear of losing you. Instead, she becomes aware of how she feels about the version of you she no longer has immediate access to. Then something else happens, either slowly or all at once. She starts checking the small signs. Did you watch her story? Did you open her message? Did you stop joking the way you used to? Did your tone shift? And again, this isn't desperation, it's awareness. Because when you pull back without hostility, without drama, without making her feel attacked, you send a message that every mature person picks up on. You value yourself enough not to chase someone who's not meeting you halfway. And whether she's deeply into you or still figuring out how she feels, this creates a moment of internal recalibration. She asks herself the question you've silently asked 100 times. Do I actually want this man in my life, or was I just enjoying his attention? And that right there is the turning point. Your pullback doesn't push her away. It forces truth to surface. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever pulled back from someone and were shocked by how they reacted? Tell me your experience in the comments and make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. When you pull back, there's a moment she won't tell anyone about. Not her friends, not social media, not even herself when she's trying to pretend she doesn't care. It's that quiet second when she asks, deep inside, why does this feel different? Because it does feel different. Not because you're controlling her emotions, but because what you've removed wasn't attention. It was connection. And women feel the absence of connection the same way men feel the absence of appreciation, silently, deeply, and unexpectedly. At first, she'll try to rationalize it. She'll tell herself you're busy. She'll tell herself she shouldn't overthink. She'll tell herself this doesn't matter as much as her mind is making it seem. But underneath all of that is a subtle sense of imbalance. She was used to your presence, your steady energy, your warmth, your consistency. She may not have rewarded it the way you hoped, but don't confuse her outward behavior with her internal reality. What you gave wasn't invisible. It was simply constant, and people forget to appreciate what they assume they won't lose. But the moment you step back, something shifts. She doesn't just notice that you're quieter, she feels the drop in emotional temperature. You're no longer giving her that subtle reassurance that she's chosen, wanted, valued. And that's when a thought enters her mind that she tries to push away. Did I misjudge him? Did I assume he'd always stay? This is where her feelings become complicated, because your pullback doesn't just remove your attention, it forces her to sit with her own. She starts observing herself in ways she didn't before. She notices that she checks her phone more often. She wonders why that last message from you felt shorter than usual. She replays your last interaction and asks herself if she came off colder than she intended. And for the first time, she realizes she can't predict your next move. That unpredictability doesn't create fear, it creates awareness. The awareness that you are not a man who clings. You are not a man who negotiates for affection. You are not a man who needs validation to exist in her world. And that's when she starts respecting you in a way she didn't before. Respect doesn't grow when you chase, it grows when you choose yourself over uncertainty. But there's more. Something far more interesting happens when she senses your emotional distance. She begins comparing how she felt when you were present versus how she feels now. She remembers the security, the curiosity, the excitement. She realizes that she felt safe to be feminine around you, not because you overwhelmed her, but because you grounded her. And losing that grounding, even temporarily, creates a space she's not used to navigating alone. She won't show it. She might act normal, keep her tone cool, move like nothing has shifted. But inside, she's evaluating you in a completely new way. She's asking herself whether she underestimated you, whether she misunderstood your value, whether she treated something rare like something replaceable. And that thought right there is powerful because it changes how she approaches you going forward. Your distance doesn't push her away, it draws out her truth. Not the truth she shares with friends, not the truth she posts online, but the truth she feels at night when she finally stops pretending she's unaffected. So let me ask you this. Honestly, do you think she valued you more when you were always available? Or now that you've given her space to feel your absence? Drop your answer in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to understand this dynamic. There's a moment, quiet, private, and almost invisible, when your pullback stops being something she notices and becomes something she feels. This is the phase most men never understand because it doesn't show up in her words. It shows up in the micro moments you'll never see. The scrolling, the pausing, the wondering, the instinctive glance toward her phone when a notification hits. Not because she's suddenly obsessed, but because her mind is trying to answer a question it can't ignore anymore. Why did he change? See, when a man pulls back without bitterness, without rudeness, without trying to provoke a reaction, it creates a different kind of emotional impact. It signals growth, stability, standards. A man who can step back with calmness is a man who is in control of his own world. And women don't fear that. They respect it. They may not say it, but they feel it deeply, because they know how rare that kind of emotional discipline is. This is where her internal dialogue becomes louder than anything she could ever say. She'll replay moments where she could have been warmer. She'll think about times she responded late or distracted. She'll notice the gap between your past self and your current self, and she'll ask herself if she contributed to that shift. And the interesting thing is this: women are incredibly intuitive. She can sense when your pullback is genuine self-preservation and not manipulation. She can feel when you're choosing peace over pressure, and that awareness makes her reassess you with new eyes. But something else happens too, something men almost never expect. Once she realizes your energy has changed, she starts evaluating her own level of investment, not out of insecurity, but out of alignment. She wonders whether she showed you enough softness, whether she matched your effort, whether she missed opportunities to build something stronger. And these thoughts come not from desperation, but from clarity, because your distance highlights what many men never give themselves credit for: the fact that your presence had value, that your effort wasn't ordinary, that your consistency wasn't something every man can offer. This is the part of female psychology most people misunderstand. Women don't react to a pullback because they're afraid of losing attention. They react because they're afraid of misreading a connection they actually cared about. And when a man who brought stability, humor, emotional safety, and genuine kindness pulls back, trust me, she feels that absence like a shift in the weather. This is where her emotions become layered. On one side, there's curiosity. On another, there's accountability. And somewhere deeper, there's the beginning of appreciation. Real appreciation. Not for what you did, but for who you were. The kind of appreciation that rises only when distance forces a person to see what they had more clearly. She won't chase immediately. She won't confess anything. She won't make some dramatic gesture. That's not how real emotional processing works. Instead, she'll lean into observation. She'll watch your tone, your timing, your presence, or lack of it. She'll notice if you're calmer, happier, more focused. She'll feel the way your detachment shifts the dynamic from her being the center of your world to simply being someone in it. And that, more than anything, creates a reaction she can't hide from herself. Your pullback doesn't make her lose interest. It makes her redefine your importance. So let me ask you directly, do you think she expected your silence to feel this heavy? Tell me in the comments, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with a man who needs to understand what actually happens beneath the surface. There comes a moment when your pullback stops being a question in her mind and becomes a mirror she has to look into. A mirror that shows her not who you are, but who she was when she had access to you. This is the part no one talks about. The stage where she realizes your silence isn't an attack. It's a revelation of how much space you filled without ever asking for permission, applause, or recognition. And once she feels that truth, something inside her softens in ways even she didn't expect. Because here's what happens next. She starts comparing the way she felt around you versus the way she feels now. She didn't notice it while you were consistent, while you were trying, while you showed effort that most men avoid. But now that you're quiet, now that you've stepped back with intention instead of anger, she sees the difference with painful clarity. You weren't just another man in her life. You were her emotional anchor, even if she never admitted it, even if she acted distracted, even if she sometimes took you for granted. And here's the truth most men underestimate. When a woman feels emotionally grounded around a man, she forms a subconscious attachment long before she forms a romantic one. She remembers how relaxed she felt when you talked, how safe your presence felt, how natural the connection was. Women don't fall for what you do. They fall for how they feel in your energy. And when that energy disappears, the absence becomes a weight she wasn't prepared to carry. This is where her thoughts shift from observation to introspection. She begins asking herself questions she never had the space to consider before. Did I make him feel appreciated? Was I too guarded? Did I meet his effort with my own? Did I assume he'd always be there? These aren't the thoughts of a desperate woman. They're the thoughts of a woman realizing she may have misread the depth of a man who wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply being himself. And the more she reflects, the more she recognizes something she never expected. You weren't pulling back to manipulate her. You were pulling back to protect yourself. That kind of maturity hits different. Because women can feel the difference between a man who withdraws with resentment and a man who steps back with self-respect. One drains them. The other awakens something inside them, something that makes them reevaluate their own emotional behavior. And that reevaluation often leads to something surprising, a desire to reconnect, not a chase, not a dramatic comeback, but a softening, a shift, a quiet but undeniable leaning in. She may check on you more subtly. She may initiate small conversations. She may open doors she once kept closed. Her tone becomes softer. Her presence becomes warmer. She doesn't do this because she's trying to regain control. She does it because your pullback showed her the value of the connection without forcing her to admit anything out loud. And this is the moment where the dynamic turns in your favor, not because you won, but because you grew, because you chose clarity over chaos, because you chose peace over pressure, because you chose yourself. Your pullback doesn't just change how she views you, it changes how she views herself with you. And that shift is what rebuilds genuine attraction. Not the superficial kind, but the grounded, long-term kind that comes from two people finally meeting at the same emotional level. So let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a woman soften toward you after you stepped back for the sake of your own peace? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear the truth behind this dynamic. There's a final shift she goes through when you pull back, one most men never see because it happens quietly, internally, and with a kind of emotional honesty she rarely shows to anyone. It's the moment she realizes that your distance didn't come from anger, disappointment, or bitterness. It came from maturity, from the simple understanding that you cannot carry a connection alone. And that truth hits harder than anything you could have said to her, because now she's not just thinking about what she felt when you were present. She's thinking about what she feels now that you're not. And the contrast is undeniable. She remembers the stability you brought, the warmth you offered, the way she felt understood in a world where most people only listen to respond. She remembers that you never demanded anything from her. You simply showed up as the best version of yourself. And losing that energy, even quietly, creates a sense of accountability she can't ignore. This is where the final emotional layer emerges. Recognition. Recognition of who you truly were to her. Recognition of the role you played in her life. Recognition of the kind of man you showed yourself to be. Not perfect, not flawless, but grounded, consistent, and emotionally intelligent. A man who gave without keeping score. A man who cared without losing himself. A man who could walk away with dignity, not resentment. And that is the kind of man women remember. Not the loud one, not the flashy one, not the one who begs, proves, or performs. The one who knows his value so deeply he doesn't need to argue it. Now she feels something she didn't expect, a desire to match the energy you once gave, to reciprocate instead of just receive, to bring effort instead of relying on yours. She may reach out in small ways, a question, a check-in, a random thought she shares, or she may show interest through her actions. Her tone softens, her presence steadies, her attention becomes more intentional. These shifts aren't accidents, they're acknowledgments. They're quiet ways of saying, I felt your absence, and I don't want to feel it again. But here's something most men overlook. Your pullback wasn't the magic. Your growth was. The way you chose self-respect over confusion. The patience you showed instead of pressure. The emotional poise you had instead of frustration. Women respond to that energy not because it creates fear of loss, but because it represents a kind of masculine stability that's becoming rare. And now the power is in your hands. Not power over her, but power over your own choices. You can decide whether you want to let her back into your world, whether the connection truly nourished you, whether the version of her who returns matches the version of you that exists now. Your pullback wasn't just a moment, it was a filter. It revealed who was meant to stay, who was meant to step up, and who was never meant to go any further with you. And this is the truth I want you to take with you. When you pull back for the right reasons, you never lose anything real. You only lose what was draining you. And what remains, what returns, what strengthens, is what was meant for the man you are becoming. So now, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever pulled back from someone and discovered a truth about them or about yourself that you didn't expect? Share your answer in the comments. And if this message hit you somewhere deep, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and send it to a man who needs to understand this truth right now.